Well, good evening. Welcome to the story tonight. Glad to have you with us on this week before Christmas. Hope that you're getting a little time to attend to your spiritual needs this week in the middle of all of the busyness of this season as well. But glad to be able to continue to share the story with you now. Hopefully, I'll remember again when we're done. We will now obviously have a couple of weeks break as we go through the holidays, and we'll pick back up again after the new year. But today we are on chapter 24. And this is our third chapter now as we enter into the New Testament, as we enter into the Gospels. There are not a lot of chapters about the Gospels. That's kind of unfortunate. And I find this typical of Bible studies that kind of go through the whole of the Bible. Because there's so much more just by sheer quantity material in the Hebrew Bible, we tend to spend a little bit more time there. I also think that sometimes we make assumptions about the Gospels, that they are very much the same, that all of the stories, the parables, the events, the miracles, the sayings, all are pretty similar. And we really miss out on just this sort of vast array of material that's in the Gospels. We forget that it comes from different sources, from different parts of the community, from different memories even. Of course, then that there are other materials out there, some of which we have in our possession, some of which we don't, that we can just simply infer from the material that we have. And so to kind of try to squash all of the gospel material, all of the gospel accounts into a couple of chapters in a book is really impossible. And I also think it's wrong because there is more than just a singular viewpoint of the life and times and sayings of Jesus. There is a width there. There is some variety in the material and some different ways of approaching and understanding things. And while, yes, the object is to get to that singular moment, that Good Friday moment, that Easter Sunday moment, there's also a lot involved in his teachings and his sayings and his events and his miracles that can be drawn from. So to try to compact this, especially this particular chapter, I think is really difficult because it just has such a wide variety of stuff. It's hard to grasp an idea or two. As I have said in other Bible studies, and I want to just reiterate here again, we can suggest there are some broad themes to the whole of the Bible. There are a handful, half a dozen, maybe a few more than that, of sort of general themes that run all the way through the scriptures, start to finish, and that provide us some context on which to understand all the various pieces of the text. That does not mean that there isn't variety within the various pieces of the text, nor does that mean that that isn't a good thing, that there is some variety there. I mean, engaging with the Bible and understanding the Bible and studying the Bible ought to be an exercise for us, ought to take something from us, ought to require us to wrestle a little bit. So it is not a good idea, nor is my objective here to just sort of simplify the material of the Gospels. They're best to just simply be read. One other thing I will say about this chapter, and I think it's really true actually about the three chapters that we're running through here, 23, 24, 25, is that the editors of the book, the story, have sort of grabbed stuff from a lot of different places and put it in a particular order. There is an ancient work called the Didache, which is a Greek word that means teachings. And in a very similar way, it tried to draw from all the gospel materials and sort them out and put them into one organized book that would sort of summarize all of the teachings of Jesus. I don't think that that's necessarily a good thing to do. The gospel writers drew from a variety of sources, put things together in a particular way to their own ends. And for us to just sort of randomly put pieces together from the four different gospels, it's not necessarily, I think, it doesn't show the most integrity in terms of our approach to the Bible. So that's something that's also difficult about this particular chapter as well. So this is what I'm going to do. I want to focus on one idea that really is raised here in the title, which is this notion of ordinary. Right? The part of what I'm assuming that the editors of the book of the story wanted to sort of show in this range of material that they have here is that Jesus was not ordinary. Now, that's a pretty simple thing to say. Obviously, he's not ordinary, right? He is the Son of God. He is the Savior, the Redeemer, the Messiah, whatever sort of title that you want to use there. But what I want to get to, and we'll circle back around to this at the end here, is it's not that he's just not ordinary because of his divinity, or not ordinary because he had superpowers, or not ordinary because he said things people had never heard before, but not ordinary because he comes to bring us to a place that is not ordinary. That the experience of Jesus, particularly just in the life of Jesus, and again, and just in the events and the teachings of the 3 years of his earthly ministry, are there to open our eyes to the possibility that all the things that we think are ordinary aren't or shouldn't be. And that living a life of faith in the midst of the ordinariness of this world is a calling to see things in an unordinary fashion. And so I'm going to grab a couple of things here out of this chapter, and I'm going to suggest that the purpose of all of this material, and what the gospel writers were doing as they were passing it along to us, is to invite us to think in brand new ways about meaning and purpose and life itself and what's valuable. So let's talk about Jesus as sort of the unordinary man. It is helpful for us to also remember, and Luther reminded us of this too, that we have a tendency to create God in our own image, as Luther would say it. And it has been the nature of the church, especially as the church has become an institution of the world, to try to make Jesus a little bit more palatable, right? A little bit easier to take. It is very true that a lot of what we teach and profess and preach in the church is a way to sort of culturate Jesus. And there is this push and tug between the realities of this world and the gospel. And we try to make religion a function of. In fact, some people deliberately make religion a function of other things, whether it's an economic system or a political system, for example, as well. And that's part of what I want to do here today, is remind us that is not what the gospel is. That is, in fact, exactly the opposite of the point. Jesus comes into the world to set things upside down, to challenge people. And in everything that he said and did, and in all the places that he went, was constantly challenging people's perceptions of themselves and of the reality of which they lived, and in the powers that were in the world. And so that's the ordinary part, or the unordinary part of Jesus, that I want us to get to here. And I think the word that I might use is strangeness. I mean, we don't think about Jesus as being strange, especially if we've been involved in the church forever and ever, and it's become a normal part of our existence. But what would it mean for us to see Jesus in the way that those early communities of faith saw him? That there was something strange and new and unique about Jesus. That is, after all, why we kind of call it the New Testament. So let me touch on a couple of things here, and let's start obviously with the parables, right? Jesus' primary way of teaching was through these things called parables. Now, the parable could be a number of things, and there's some disagreement among the gospel writers of what they consider a parable or not. Some of them are just simply stories, like little fables, little made-up sort of stories, or they're proverbs, or some of them are just metaphors, figures, sort of aphorisms that Jesus would say. Sometimes he just teaches them randomly. Sometimes they come as an answer to a question. They're a reminder to us that one of the things that we know about Jesus is he just didn't just come out and say it straight. Right? I mean, one of the things that makes reading the Gospels a strange experience is that you just don't get straight answers to questions. He just doesn't come and say, okay, do this, 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 and then that will happen. And does not just simply lay out an easy program of religion, which is what we have spent 2 millennia trying to do ever since. Instead, he gives these more general answers that require not just require us to use our reason and our other gifts, but also require us to use our hearts to feel our way through. I mean, if a parable is a metaphor, then that has to exist on a much higher level than just simply an academic level. That requires an emotional maturity, even a spiritual sort of response to it as well. So this is what I want to kind of do. I'm going to read 4 quick parables here, all of which are very similar in that they use agricultural references, imagery, to which Jesus' audience could easily relate for the most part, to which we can too, but we're going to have to do a little contextualizing to put ourselves in that first century as well. But let me catch 4 quick parables, and I'm just going to read to you. Sorry. These are all in this chapter here. This is from Mark chapter 4. It said, Jesus began to teach them many things in parables. And in his teaching, he said to them, listen, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Other seed fell on rocky ground, where it did not have much soil, and it sprang up quickly, since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. Other seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. Other seed fell into good soil and brought forth grains, growing up and increasing and yielding 30 and 60 and 100-fold. And he said, let anyone with ears listen. Okay, here's another one. This is from the 13th chapter of Matthew. It said, Jesus put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, but when it has grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. Okay, here's another one from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus said to them, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his fields. But while everyone was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the slaves of the householder came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from? He answered, an enemy has done this. The slaves said to them, Then do you want us to go and gather them? But he replied, No, for in gathering the weeds you would uproot the wheat along with them. That both of them grow together until the harvest, and at harvest time I will tell to my reapers, collect the weeds first and bind them into bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. Okay, one more. The kingdom of God is as if someone would scatter seed on the ground and would sleep and rise night and day, and the seed would sprout and grow. He does not know how. The earth produces of itself, first the stalk, then the head, then the full grain in the head. But when the grain is ripe, at once he goes in with his sickle, because the harvest has come. So a fascinating sort of parables that have a sort of a common thread running to them, which I think is best caught in this one line in this last parable here, which is in Mark chapter 4. He does not know how. I mean, think about ancient people and how they think about agriculture. Right? They've grown some technology and some ability to grow, but they're still very dependent on all of the elements and on things to grow right. And even today, with all of our advancements, right, we're still at the mercy of conditions and weather, and you know, things still have to kind of go the right way for us to get the crops that we need. And so part of what these parables do is they create this sort of sense of mystery around the notion of God's word. Well, God's word just kind of happens. I mean, think of the parable of the sower. I love the parable of the sower because I just can't imagine what's the matter with this sower. Right? So in a normal interpretation of that parable, we would assume God is the sower and the seed is his word and he goes out. But why is the sower throwing the seed on the path? Surely he knows better than that. Why is he throwing it among the weeds? Surely he knows. Why is he wasting his seed in places where he knows it won't grow? And then he puts it into good soil. And yet still, sometimes it gives 30, sometimes 60, sometimes 100, right? In the same good soil. We want to bring that parable to an interpretation that says, okay, so go be good soil. Well, how in the world do you be good soil? Right? And good soil is just good soil. And why doesn't the farmer do anything to make the soil better so that his seed will take root? That's what we would do now, right? We would prepare the ground and fertilize the ground and get it ready so that we could get the most out of our harvest. But there's this randomness to these sort of agricultural parables, right? The mustard seed, right? This tiniest of seed that becomes the greatest of all of the shrubs, and these sort of mysterious weeds that appear. But instead of weeding them out so that the wheat can grow, we just wait till the end and we sort it out at the harvest. Right there, it is a common thread through all of the parables that they're just different. They are mysterious and strange, and they defy easy explanation, though we have surely tried for 2 millennia to make those understandable, to somehow boil them down into some specific analogy. We said, well, this is what that means. Whereas the thing we should have always been doing was asking and said the question, well, how does that feel? How does that feel to me when I don't feel God's word bearing fruit in my life? Am I bad soil? Am I just going through a rocky part of my journey? Is the point of this that God's word will bear fruit in its own way and time, and that in the midst of the weeds of my life and the fruitfulness of my life, God will somehow sort that all out in time? I mean, as you read through this chapter and you read through these parables, what I would invite you to do is to not try to explain them so much as just to experience them and let them happen, and find yourself in that place and consider the mystery of how the Word of God, how the kingdom of God works. It is in some of the Gospels we have immediately after the parables, and the parable of the sower is a good example of that. Jesus takes the disciples aside and in secret explains to them the meaning of the parables. Why take the disciples aside and give them secret information? Is that more of a reflection on the disciples themselves and how they approach the telling of the gospel stories? Why not tell the whole world? Why leave people in this state of mystery where they don't have all the information they need to live out their faith? Or is maybe that the way God intends it to be? Maybe he wants faith to be about more than just knowledge and understanding. Maybe that sense of mystery and that sense of the kingdom being more than what we can grasp is an important part of faith. Maybe that's why we have parables. Maybe that's what makes faith extraordinary, is that it is simply nothing that can be bound by human knowledge and understanding. As we're on the subject of parables, let's turn to other parables. In particular, what I would consider the parables of grace. All the parables are about grace, right? But there are some specific parables that are especially fascinating. And I'm thinking in particular about parables in Luke 15. There are other parables as well that are really important in this way. But I'm going to read you the first part of the 15th chapter of Luke, and then the last half of the chapter as well. But this is how it starts. It says, "Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, 'This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them.' So Jesus told them this parable. 'Which one of you, having 100 sheep and losing one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? When he has found it, he lays it on his shoulder and rejoices. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost." Just so, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. Or what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one of them, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? When she has found it, she calls together her friends and her neighbors, saying, Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I had lost. Just so I tell you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. So, and then, of course, the rest of the 15th chapter is the very well-known, the very familiar story of the prodigal son. So here are these really lovely stories, and we read them as being heartwarming, and we use them as ways to say, well, even if you think you're totally lost, there's always hope for you. We use them as ways to incite the mission of the church. We should get after that 99th, that 100th sheep as well. But it would be wrong for us to gloss over just the oddness, again, of these parables. If I had 100 sheep and I had lost one, wouldn't simple human economics, worldly economics dictate to me that I just have to count that one off as an acceptable loss because it's much more important to protect the 99? Right? I mean, would I really get up and use oil in a lamp and the time and the expense and sweep my entire house for one coin? Wouldn't I wait and find it later when I had time? And then, of course, the prodigal son is, in all honesty, the worst example of bad parenting than there can possibly be, and not the way that any of us would treat a child who behaved in that fashion. But it is a reminder that grace is extraordinary again. Grace is not ordinary. Grace is strange. And it causes strange things to happen, and it identifies a God who acts in strange ways too. The very existence of the incarnation, the very idea of a God coming in human form to be among his people, to sacrifice himself in this amazing act of love on the cross. The whole idea of resurrection itself is not ordinary. And that's the point of Jesus' teachings and Jesus' works and Jesus' ministry. He comes to do things that are not ordinary, to invite us to consider a God who is also not ordinary, and to heal us from our tendency to try to fit God into neat categories and try and fit religion into neat practices and to try to somehow systematize things and organize things. That is not how it works. And really, when you read the Gospels with an open mind and an open heart, and you try to leave behind, again, all of the work that the church has done over the centuries of trying to systematize this material and to just sort of let it happen to you, you start to notice that it's unusual. And then it starts to occur to you that maybe that's a good thing. I mean, think about other pieces in the Bible as well. Think about the story of the rich young ruler, right? Who Jesus tells, who has followed the law and kept the faith and done everything he's supposed to do, but that's not enough for Jesus, and he tells him to sell everything and give the money away to the poor and come follow me. What an extraordinary thing for Jesus to do, right? I mean, it's just crazy that Jesus did. Consider the story of the hypocrites, the parable of the widow's mite. Right? All of these places where Jesus lifts up those people who are not religious, right? Where Jesus goes against the grain of what is normal in order to invite people into a brand new experience of the kingdom of God. And here we are always trying to make Jesus sort of an establishment figure that we can depend upon. Whereas it seems to me that really when we read the Gospels, what we discover is a figure who is constantly challenging our preconceived notions. Which is to me one last topic, and that's the miracles and the healing stories, which are in and of themselves wondrous and amazing and affirming. And don't we love the idea of a Jesus who will come and solve our problems with a sweep of his hand in an almost sort of magical fashion? How easy it is to overlook how radical the healing stories are. They are reminders that God can, in a moment's notice, completely turn things around. in a new direction. That there are powers in this world that are above us, powers in this world that can control us, but none is more powerful than God. One of the things I always want to caution people about the healing stories is that we don't treat them again like magic. Because how do we speak to people then who are waiting for their miracles? Right? How do we talk to people who are waiting for their healing? I've had this conversation with myself now a lot in the last few years. The point of the miracle stories, especially of the healing stories, that there is nothing beyond the power of God. And so what does that mean to us then to call ourselves creatures, subjects of that God who has finally in the end all the power, who can decide yes or no, who can do everything? What does that mean for us except that we are to admit our own powerlessness and to prepare ourselves for the constant possibility that God can do anything he wants to if he chooses, and to somehow be willing to live in that uncertainty. I mean, that is the thing finally about grace. Grace is something that God gives out, not something that we can earn or determine or in any way control. So the point of the Gospels, the point really of Jesus' life and ministry, is to create that space of uncertainty in us and for us, so that we might find it in ourselves the faith we need to live in that place and to simply wait and depend upon Jesus to come by, God to come by, to bring the healing and the miracle that we need. One of my favorite healing stories, I think, might be the woman with the hemorrhage, who sneaks up behind Jesus in the crowd and touches the hem of his cloak and is healed. Gets healing from Jesus without him even asking, has this momentary access to Jesus' power, and has done nothing to deserve it or earn it. She's stolen it. Right? And it's just this beautiful reminder that in faith there is this power that we might just by happenstance stumble upon, or that God might just be by us, come past us in the right time and in the right place, and our miracle might come. And to live every day in that sense of hopefulness, caught in between the reality of life and as ordinary as it is, and all of the great possibilities that exist for us because of our faith in this unordinary man that we call Jesus of Nazareth. So the question is, what is not ordinary about Jesus? As hard as we have tried to make Jesus ordinary, accessible, understandable, useful even, in the way that we practice religion, the Gospels, I think, are a constant reminder to us of the qualities of Jesus, of his words, of his works that are not ordinary. And the purpose of the Gospels, the purpose of all of this material, is to challenge our assumptions about how things are, how things should be, how things can be. Because if faith is anything, it is not a product of this world and of this life. It is a gift that comes to us from God, a gift given to us in the baptism. It is a spirit. But it's not just that it's not ordinary. It's not just that it's weird or strange, or that you might accidentally get a miracle, or that you might gain some insight that you didn't have before. When we say that Jesus is not ordinary, we're also being mindful of the fact that Jesus is in fact exactly the opposite of the world as we understand and know it. So we are a couple of days now from Christmas Eve. We have been spending time in this season of Advent. We have read Mary's Magnificat last week. And Mary's song of praise at the discovery of her pregnancy, at the discovery that the birth of the Redeemer is imminent, is this song about upside down values, right? About how God brings down the powerful, about how God lifts up the lowly, feeds the hungry, sends those who are full away empty. That the kingdom of God is not only not like the world in which we live, it is the opposite of the world in which we live. This path that we are on in the Gospels is to lead us to the events of Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, to the exact opposite of the way we would expect God to behave. Not a God who comes in power to somehow wrest control of the world and to bring sinners to heel and to exact his wrath and punishment for all the wrongs that have been done him. But a God who does exactly not what we expect him to do, exactly the opposite of what we expect him to do. So in that sense, ordinary is kind of a small word for us today. It's not that Jesus is not ordinary. It's that he's anti-ordinary. For you and I who are trying to find a way to live out our faith in the midst of our very ordinary lives, in the midst of our daily activities and vocations, our constant challenge in faith is to find a way to do that that is also exactly not ordinary. So that's chapter 24 of the story. Next week, chapter 25, not next week, but the next time we gather, we'll talk about Jesus as the Son of God, and we'll try to unpack a little bit of these layers of theology that have piled up over the years and try to get back to exactly what it means for us to see God at work in the man from Nazareth. As always, if you have thoughts, comments, questions, please reach out to me. I'm always glad to talk. In the meantime, we will not have a Bible study next week. We will be back on, I believe, 5th of January with chapter 25. Have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we'll see you in 2022.